I'm David Sandilands, Principal Solutions Architect at Puppet by Perforce. This talk is about the 2023 State of DevOps Report, Platform Engineering Edition. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the State of DevOps Report, why this year we've kind of focused on platform engineering, some details about how the report was performed and gathered, and then running through some of the core findings of the report. I'll also kind of chip in with some of my own experience and background. And just to kind of give some intros, for those not familiar with Puppet, Puppet is an infrastructure configuration company and a compliance tool set who's been released, first released in 2005, with both enterprise and open source products. And with a strong history in the DevOps community as a contributor and influencer. Myself, for my sins, I did 13 years in banking at NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland in the UK, working in their historic, very old school platforms. Hearing a very sad description of somebody as being an old school person because they used to work in Solaris and AIX, and having to nod my head and say, yep, I did that too. And more recently kind of going through their digital transformation as they went to kind of an IaaS platform. So the State of DevOps Report, launched in 2013 and released annually. It's a survey looking to ask questions about how organizations are adopting DevOps. 40,000 people have been surveyed since its initial inception. What we found is that after kind of period of 2013 where there was initially a lot of progress, over the last 4 reports we've kind of found that we've only had growth from kind of 10 to 18% of organizations going from kind of middling evolution of DevOps to highly evolved. And the majority, 80%, are kind of remaining in this middle level. And actually, in fact, kind of DevOps has become so prevalent with many of these organizations, they're not even kind of talking about it as a term anymore. That it's just the way they work and the way they've got used to working. So as kind of part of this, we've chosen not to kind of do the same general high-level DevOps reports, and we've tried to focus in on some of the common themes we see in the organizations who have reached highly evolved state. And one of the patterns we saw was platform engineering. Because what we'd seen in last year's research was simply adopting automation and infrastructure code does not create a highly evolved organization. A focus on improved organizational structure, team identities, and interaction are the most kind of common attributes of highly evolved DevOps organizations. And that led to a clear pattern of platform engineering in that frame, helping with those things. This doesn't mean you have to adopt platform team models to be good at DevOps. Rather, it's just having that sort of well-defined approach seems to help organizations to kind of path to succeed with DevOps, particularly in the enterprise. And you know, to kind of to talk about the numbers, what we found was with platform engineering, 65% of those who were towards the high end of DevOps evolution were using self-service platforms, compared to only 40% towards the lower end. So going forward for the State of DevOps Report, expect to see a lot more reports like this, where we focus in on particular topics, rather than our kind of historically more general. So for this year's report, the Platform Engineering Edition, platform engineering has obviously suffered from being a buzzword, but we wanted to kind of zone in as to actually what it meant to organizations, because just in the same way DevOps can mean very different things to different people, we've wanted to kind of zone in. So we had 438 respondents respond to the survey. It was done in 2 ways. We did it via a kind of snowballing method, whereby we put out a survey via social media, web, and via our partners, and then via word of mouth, it snowballed like a snowball rolling down a hill. We also used a kind of professional grouping who were kind of an independent non-profit who provide kind of expertise and opinions so that our kind of our bias in terms of who we were likely to get to fill out the survey wouldn't kind of completely show through. And we also had a grouping of those who didn't use platforms to kind of provide a control group on opinions. The survey was conducted between the 14th of September and the 25th of October 2022. Unsurprisingly, the main industry to respond was technology. And I'm hoping that's a nice big screen, so hopefully you can see a breakdown of there's plenty of organizations from government to finance to education and so on. Varying sizes of companies, from smaller companies to larger. And in terms of the platform team role, it was obviously keen not just to have the opinions of people who ran platform teams, because they're obviously going to have a good opinion of their platform. And a mix of different team responsibilities. I appreciate team names are a bit strange these days, so plenty of people are in teams that are just called DevOps now. But yes, a good mix of different teams, from kind of traditional infrastructure teams to teams involved in transformation. So the kind of initial findings, most platform teams are still new. Only 19% of respondents reported that the platform teams were established more than 5 years ago. I think this is kind of from the thing we see that large-scale platform teams up until recently have been predominantly the place of new big tech companies. And despite how it kind of feels in the industry, they just make up a kind of small sector of enterprise firms. So, for most now is the time to adopt, and kind of looking at how people felt about, had they adopted platform teams at the right time. Overwhelmingly, people feel it's the right time. 23% saying it's too late, and only a very small section saying they felt it was too early. Why platform engineering? So, when we look at what led to the creation of a platform team for your organization, it's not too surprising that increasing the speed of delivery comes out as the highest point, followed by the need to scale. And then, looking at engineers taking too long to spending too much time kind of working on the tools rather than actually their job and features. Because I think that was something we commonly saw was, particularly in large organizations, lots of teams were opened up to the freedom to develop what tools they were working in. But that just kind of gave them a kind of bigger cognitive load of trying to work out, what they should be working on. And in some organizations, like my own background in banking, there was plenty of teams that didn't realistically have the skills to do that well. And further down the scale, we also see there in terms of consultancy and leadership requests, which is probably coming from the point of platform engineering being very prominent in a lot of marketing buzzwords just now. Looking at the key goals, seeing that problem solving is the highest probably reflects how platform teams aim to prevent other teams from having to keep repeatedly solving common problems. And the rest of the answers can really be seen around enabling the users of the platforms, with education and empowerment of developers and product teams featuring prominently at 47% and 40%, and 46% answering to promote best practices within organizations. I think this kind of people-centric approach naturally follows previous DevOps implementations, where enterprises were too focused on the tech and the tools, and kind of stalled in their DevOps journey as they kind of struggled with the various silos of people. So going a bit more into purpose and structure, what capabilities does a self-service platform offer? Offered by the platform is the provisioning of infrastructure for developers is key, with deployment, operation monitoring, and security being identified. Because I think if you look at kind of, plenty of people said to me, platforms aren't new. There's been platforms, there was a platform at the bank when I was deploying AIX. But all it did was simply that one step of getting you an AIX machine configured to a specification. The key thing is developers need to get something that's actually usable at the end, not something where they have to keep stepping through different sections and going to one team to get DNS, going to another team to get their OS, and other teams to get their monitoring and pseudo rules set up. If I'm focusing purely on a kind of provisioning example. So that's just not sufficient. Teams must be able to deliver value to their users. The majority of respondents are reporting that in terms of the number of platforms, they're reporting that they have between 2 and 4, while 30% have 5 or more. And this to us indicates that platforms are emerging from different parts of the organization. And we kind of see this, that they can emerge in different ways. Organically from volume stream developers, looking to share their solutions with each other. From particularly advanced and capable operations teams who have kind of high levels of trust within the organization. And also sometimes when you have progressive management who look to kind of move the organization in a transformation. We don't believe that anyone should be trying to force one platform to rule them all. We think the kind of focus should come from exactly those kind of teams we talked about there. So talking about how centralized they are, to be clear, when we're saying centralized, we're meaning whether if a platform's centralized, we're talking about different business units using a platform together. So 82% of platform teams are centralized, and this pattern of centralization seems to be increasing over time, with 52% reporting an increase of that centralization. And 36% of those who are already using a centralized approach reporting that even more centralization would be better. With decentralized teams, we see that 37% believe it would perform better if they were actually more centralized. And to be really clear here, both users and operators are giving more or less the same answer in this area. So it's obviously not just a platform team saying it would be all better if everyone just came to my platform. Now, there's always going to be some need for decentralization. There's going to kind of be legality requirements, whether that be a kind of a business units in a certain region, or whether if you're in a finance organization and your traders can't work on the same platform as your retail bank, but the general pattern we see is for decentralization. In terms of the benefits, I think this is the thing that took me back the most, because when I think of my experience of trying to introduce colleagues to things coming from exactly these kind of conferences and these kind of new ideas, there tends to be a high level of cynicism, particularly when something's been a buzzword. But we see that 93% of respondents are reporting that the platform team is a step in the right direction. And 94% agree the concept has helped their firms better realize DevOps. And the impact on velocity has been surprising as well. 68% agreed it increased their velocity. What we did find was that this confidence and improvement was better over time. More than 53% of firms that had been practicing platform engineering for more than 3 years reported their speed increased a great deal, while it was just 35% for firms who'd implemented less than 3 years. So, again, to highlight, creating this level of change in a relatively short period is very impressive. If we look at a lot of organizations who, went through kind of their general DevOps approach, many of them spent 5 or 10 years even trying to adopt DevOps practices with very little success in some organizations. So, looking at how confident teams are in continuing to meet their goals, we do see the longevity of the platform directly correlates to that confidence. And given how cynical our industry can be and how cyclical things can be, when you're dealing with, as I said, something that's been very commonly a buzzword, we do find it noticeable. There's still the majority are, somewhat confident or very confident, even less than 3 years. But seeing, the switch to completely confident of 27% over 3 years, and a total of, confident or very confident of 73%, just kind of shows that the platform builds over time. Looking at, whose needs are served most by platforms, it's very pleasing to see 30% of see the whole company is served best. 29% see developer teams, which is exactly what you'd hope with platforms typically looking to serve your IDPs. And what's interesting is, excuse me, the percentage you think it serves the whole company increases, again, when it's been over 3 years. One thing kind of, some people maybe worry about is in terms of seeing infrastructure teams as just a kind of small chunk of that. But, what we do expect that because, ultimately it's not really to service the infrastructure teams. We're wanting the platform to service our developers, and, the infrastructure teams kind of feed into that process. Because we've never run infrastructure for its own sake. Ultimately it's been about getting on the services and tools on top of it. Excuse me. So, looking at some of the kind of problems people are reporting with the platforms, I think a large part of it can be about setting expectations and creating awareness of the platform. One of the things we kind of see, the largest percentage here is the cycle slower than people expected, and resistance to adoption of the platform. And I think both those things kind of really focus down on getting that buy-in and also creating, a lot of companies are not very good at actually making people aware of what their SLAs and SLOs are around their platforms. And I myself, when we went from quite a rudimentary platform to a truly platform engineering platform, we made that mistake, and the first major outage caused a huge problem, despite the fact it was well within our expected error rates. So, we'll kind of come into talking about how product owners can help with that in the next few slides. But, a lot of what we see in terms of the priorities for the next 12 months looks to kind of address that point of creating awareness about the platform and educating and enabling users of the platform and developers. Oh, that's not what I was going to do. So, coming into the kind of needed product management skills, when it comes to putting the right people with the right skills in place to actually do platform engineering, most respondents seem to have their priorities in order. When we asked about the most important skills a product manager needs to drive a successful platform, we learned that platform product managers need to be great communicators. They need a knack of problem solving. They must be able to foster collaboration across teams. And they've got to be able to turn complex user requests into core requirements that can fit a platform. And they need a significant understanding of internal customers. So, we tend to find organizations who try and pull someone completely external from their organization to perform this role can often struggle to understand the internal politics and complexities of that organization. So in terms of going more into the challenges, 66% of respondents strongly or somewhat agreed their platform engineering team has a product owner who evangelizes the products and services. And this would be a huge worry for us, is that without that individual doing that evangelism and helping that education and working with customers to establish the needs of the platform, as we see these young platforms grow, they could easily come into trouble. Now, an interesting thing comes is 48% of respondents agree their senior management, their organizations do not understand the value of platforms, And even a similar degree, the respondents themselves say that 51% of them say they're equally confused about the concept. So again, I think this points to the importance of the product manager, who should be in there to help this understanding, both within their own platform team and within senior stakeholders and leaders. So let's get this. Again, just to kind of hit that point, treating your platform as a product is a key tenet of modern platform engineering. While this is generally well understood, the data tells us that organizations are underinvesting in those product management skills. And one of the core problems I've seen is when people feel like the platform's well established, that's often the point where they'll feel like, well, we've invested all this money now, the platform seems stable, we don't need this product manager. And that, that will eventually kind of hurt the long-term future of the platform, as nobody is there to kind of continue the evolution of the platform. So, to kind of, summarize up, there's no room for complacency. Young platforms can expect rapid growth as they're evangelized and as people are kind of getting a taste for self-service. Industry and company cycles can affect this focus on product. It's very easy for these kind of soft skills to be viewed as easy to make redundant in downturns. And we kind of see the key thing is platforms will fail if the only focus is the technology. So again, I know I've said it so many times, but the platform has to be treated as a product, not a project. And I can think back to the bad old days of platforms when even doing something as simple as going from RHEL 8 to RHEL 9 was in fact a project, and you had to kind of mug someone coming in to kind of say your project's going to have to pay for us to deliver this. And probably because I've just seen the meme so much and it's a little bit painful, DevOps is not dead. Platform engineering has kind of been somewhat hyped in terms of that because it's been so successful and had such a big impact. Some people have been claiming it supplants DevOps, but for me, platform engineering is just another kind of theory that's due to its success. It's going to become a part of DevOps in the way that Agile and other things have been borrowed into DevOps practices. For me, I'll be interested in future DevOps reports to see the sustainability of these platforms. With so many only kind of under 3 years old, it'll be interesting to see how people are coping with growth, how people are coping with changing demands, and whether people are continuing to keep the awareness long after potential transformation programs have ended. So with that, you can get a full copy of the report with more of the graphs and more of the information to read at your leisure. So thanks to the sponsors of our report. Thank you today for listening. And are there any questions? No worries. Also, if anyone has any thoughts of things that should be in future State of DevOps reports, let us know. And we're over at the Puppet stand over in the area, and just thanks for your time.